She terrified a generation of TV viewers, cackling from behind a bubbling cauldron, draped in cobwebs, with that unmistakable gravelly laugh that could chill your bones and warm your heart all at once. To millions, she was simply Grandmama from the Addams Family, the eccentric, spell-casting elder of television's most macabre household. But behind that iconic character was a woman whose real life was filled with its own strange twists, tragic turns, and almost unbelievable coincidences. Her name was Blossom Rock, or maybe you knew her as Marie Blake, but chances are you didn't know her at all. Not really, because while the world adored her younger sister, Hollywood golden girl Jeanette MacDonald, Blossom lived in the margins. She was the forgotten sister, the late bloomer, the character actress who only got her shot at fame when most others were retired or forgotten. And what happened after her breakthrough? That's where things get eerie: a sudden illness, a haunting family tragedy, and an exit from the spotlight that was as quiet as it was heartbreaking. This isn't just the story of a forgotten actress. It's a tale about survival in an industry that's obsessed with youth, beauty, and fame. It's about what happens when the cameras stop rolling. And it might just be one of the strangest, most underappreciated legacies in Hollywood history. The MacDonald sisters. To understand Blossom Rock's journey, you have to go all the way back to the turn of the 20th century. In a modest home in Philadelphia, the MacDonald family raised 3 daughters, each with a mind of her own, but only 2 would chase the spotlight. Blossom, born Edith Marie. Blossom MacDonald in 1895 was the eldest. From a young age, she showed a flair for humor, mimicry, and performance. But she didn't have the crystalline soprano voice that would soon make her younger sister Jeanette famous. Instead, Blossom had stage smarts and a sharp comedic edge that drew people in not with song, but with laughter. Jeanette, born in 1903, was the dreamy one, talented, ambitious, and blessed with the kind of looks Hollywood adored. When the silent era gave way to musicals, Jeanette soared, singing alongside Nelson Eddy in a string of MGM hits that defined romantic fantasy for an entire generation. And Blossom? She took a different road. She went into vaudeville, grinding it out on live stages across the country, working comedy acts, character skits, and musical bits. While Jeanette posed for glamorous portraits, Blossom was dodging beer bottles and smoky clubs.
Money?
No, hair of woman's hair. See?
Their careers couldn't have been more different, and yet they never really drifted apart. Despite the fame gap, Blossom and Jeanette stayed close. There was no public rivalry, no bitterness, but behind the scenes, that's where the real tension simmered. Imagine living in the shadow of a sister whose voice echoed across continents while your own name was left off most movie posters. It wasn't jealousy. It was something more subtle, a kind of quiet resignation. Blossom Rock knew she had talent. She just never had the right stage to prove it. Not yet. When Blossom Rock entered Hollywood, she did something that would define much of her early film career. She changed her name. As Marie Blake, she was suddenly anonymous again, a fresh slate in a town that had already written its star roles in gold. But she wasn't chasing glamour or fame. What Blossom wanted was work. And in the Hollywood of the 1930s and 40s, a woman with comic chops, timing, and character presence could find a niche if she was willing to accept being forgotten. Marie Blake quickly became one of those faces audiences remembered, even if they didn't know her name. She appeared in more than 50 films, often uncredited. She played secretaries with snappy comebacks, nosy neighbors who knew everyone's business, and nurses who stole scenes with one raised eyebrow. She had a recurring role in the popular Dr. Kildare movie series, playing the loyal hospital switchboard operator Sally. It wasn't a glamorous part, but she gave it sparkle. Every line delivered with crisp comic timing, every reaction a reminder that the smallest roles could still matter. But make no mistake, she was never offered the lead, not once. In a studio system that prized youth and bombshell looks, Marie Blake didn't fit the mold. She wasn't the romantic ingenue or the sultry femme fatale. She was the kind of woman who made the leads look good, but never got the close-up. And yet she persisted. She worked through the Great Depression, through wartime, through the rise of television. She watched studios fold, contracts disappear, and countless young starlets get swallowed by the industry. But Marie Blake, Blossom Rock, endured. Some would say she was just lucky to keep working. Others might call her a character actress with no ego. But the truth? She was an underdog, a professional, a woman playing a long game in a town that rarely gives second chances. And then, just when the phone stopped ringing, it rang again. A freak show breakthrough. By the early 1960s, Blossom Rock's acting career had all but faded. The roles had dried up. The studio system that once gave her steady work was collapsing. She was in her late 60s, an age when most actresses, if not already forgotten, were remembered only through black and white reruns. But television was becoming the new frontier, and with it came a new kind of entertainment, quirky, offbeat, and willing to take risks Hollywood never would. The Addams Family was one such risk. Based on Charles Addams's Gothic cartoon strips, it imagined a world where the bizarre was normal and the normal was terrifying. It was dark comedy before the term even existed. The producers needed someone special to play Grandmama, a ghoulish elder with a mischievous heart, equal parts spooky and lovable, someone who could chew scenery, deliver wild one-liners, and still charm America's families. When Blossom auditioned, the room reportedly went still. She didn't just understand the role, she was the role. With her expressive face, comic timing honed over decades, and a voice that could swing between sweet and sinister, Blossom Rock turned Grandmama into an icon. Dressed in layers of black, hair frizzed to cartoonish heights, and eyes full of gleeful mischief, she became a scene stealer in every episode. And something magical happened. Children loved her, parents laughed with her, and suddenly, after decades of playing background characters, Blossom Rock had fans. Real fans. People wrote letters. They asked for photos. They stopped her on the street. She'd spent her whole career fading into the scenery, and now she was unforgettable. This was more than just a job. It was a career resurrection. Blossom had defied the industry's cruelest rules. She found stardom not in her youth, but in her 60s, and she did it by being different. But the joy wouldn't last forever. The Interview, a glimpse into the woman behind the witch. In 1965, at the height of the Addams Family's success, Blossom Rock gave a rare and fascinating interview. Seated calmly, her eyes bright with mischief, she spoke with clarity and warmth about her long, winding career. She didn't brag, she didn't vent, but the truths she shared painted a picture more revealing than any tell-all memoir. She recalled her early days in vaudeville, not with bitterness, but with a kind of nostalgic affection. Back then, she said, every performance was a gamble. You had to win the crowd with sheer charisma, because if you lost them, you lost the night. It was the best training ground imaginable. When asked about her sister, Jeanette, Blossom's voice grew softer. She spoke of Jeanette with obvious love, calling her a true artist. But there was a moment, just a flicker, where the interviewer sensed something unsaid. You could tell Blossom knew she'd never have that level of fame. She'd never be the headliner or the MGM princess, but she also didn't need to be. I found my joy in the work, she said simply. And now people know my name. That's more than I ever expected. She also addressed her role on The Addams Family and how surreal it felt to become famous for playing an old witch. It's funny, she laughed, that it took a house full of monsters to make me feel seen. That interview in hindsight feels like a farewell letter wrapped in gratitude. Blossom was finally content, but just as she found peace, fate was preparing one final blow. The stroke that silenced her. Just as Blossom Rock was basking in her unexpected career renaissance, the unthinkable happened. Shortly after the Addams Family ended its two-season run in 1966, Blossom suffered a debilitating stroke. It struck quickly and viciously, robbing her of her speech, the very tool that had sustained her for decades. The woman who once delivered snappy one-liners, played quirky nurses, and made millions laugh with her haunted house hilarity was suddenly silent. It was an especially cruel fate for someone whose entire livelihood had been built around her voice, timing, and presence. Doctors gave her the best care available, and she did recover some mobility. But her speech never fully returned, and with it, her acting career came to a heartbreaking close. Producers who had once seen her as a fresh spark in the world of sitcoms quietly stopped calling. The offers dried up. The doors of Hollywood, which had only recently creaked open to welcome her back in, slammed shut once more, this time for good. To outsiders, it may have looked like the end of her story, but for Blossom Rock, it wasn't defeat. It was transformation. She retreated from the spotlight but never fell into bitterness. She remained active behind the scenes, offering wisdom, attending fan conventions when she could, and supporting efforts to preserve classic television and film history. Still, the silence weighed heavily. Those who knew her said that she longed to speak again, to share stories, to perform, to simply connect. But instead, she smiled, she listened, and she waited. Meanwhile, something eerier was unfolding in her personal life. A mirror tragedy, one that bound her fate even tighter to that of her famous sister, Jeanette. While Blossom Rock could no longer perform, she found a different kind of calling in her later years, becoming the guardian of her sister's legacy. Jeanette MacDonald had died in 1965, just as the Addams Family was launching Blossom into the spotlight. The loss was sudden, and Blossom had barely had time to grieve before her own life changed drastically. But as her health stabilized, she turned her attention to something deeply personal, setting the record straight. You see, Jeanette's life had been shrouded in studio myth-making. MGM had worked overtime to maintain her image as America's perfect soprano, pure, elegant, untouched by scandal. But behind the pristine facade were whispered rumors of a decades-long secret romance with her co-star Nelson Eddy. The romance MGM tried to bury. Blossom, once sworn to silence, began to open up. She became an invaluable resource for biographer Sharon Rich, who was investigating Jeanette and Nelson's true relationship. With incredible detail, Blossom confirmed suspicions long held by fans. Yes, Jeanette and Nelson were lovers. Yes, the studio forced them apart. And yes, Jeanette had suffered quietly and tragically in ways the public never saw. Blossom shared letters. She recounted conversations. She offered memories no one else could. And in doing so, she brought depth, pain, and humanity to a sister who had too often been painted as porcelain. It wasn't an easy decision. Blossom knew she was pulling back the curtain on a carefully constructed illusion, but she also knew the truth mattered, not just for Jeanette's fans, but for history. She may have lost her voice, but she found a way to speak. Through her memories, her honesty, and her courage, Blossom helped rewrite her sister's story, and in doing so, she finally took control of her own. The final curtain call. On January 14, 1978, Blossom Rock passed away quietly in Los Angeles. There were no headlines, no televised tributes, just a brief obituary noting her role as Grandmama on the Addams Family and her relationship to Jeanette MacDonald. But what chills many fans to this day is the date, January 14th, exactly 13 years to the day after her sister Jeanette died. It felt like a poetic, even supernatural conclusion to a story that had always been tinged with mystery. The sisters had been close in life, and now they were linked in death. One more eerie detail in a life full of strange timing and haunting coincidence. Blossom Rock left no children. She had no Hollywood mansion, no Academy Awards, and no fortune to speak of. But what she left behind was far more meaningful. She left behind a legacy of resilience, of fighting through obscurity, ageism, and personal tragedy to find her moment. She left behind laughter, captured forever on screen, And she left behind the truth about herself, about her sister, and about the cost of fame. Today, fans of the Addams Family still dress as Grandmama for Halloween. They quote her lines, they laugh at her antics. Most don't know the woman behind the character, but those who do never forget her. Because Blossom Rock wasn't just a supporting player in someone else's story. She was the unsung heroine of her own. The legacy of a late bloomer. Blossom Rock's life is the kind of story Hollywood loves to tell, but rarely lives out. A woman who waited decades for her moment, a sister who stood in the shadows only to emerge in her 60s as a cultural icon, a performer whose career began in the footlights of vaudeville and ended on television screens across America. She defied the rules of fame, rules that said women over 40 were invisible, rules that said you had to be young, glamorous, and scandal-free to matter. Blossom proved you could be odd, older, and still unforgettable. She showed that legacy isn't about awards or headlines. It's about impact, about how you made people feel, about what you left behind. Her story reminds us that success isn't always fast or flashy. Sometimes it comes in the form of a strange little role on a spooky sitcom. Sometimes it's in the courage to tell the truth after a lifetime of silence. And sometimes it's in simply surviving, smiling, and casting one last spell on the world before you go. So next time you hear that unmistakable cackle or see Grandmama stirring her pot on screen, remember Blossom Rock, not just the character she played, but the journey she took. She wasn't just part of Hollywood history. She was Hollywood history. And now she's finally getting the credit she always deserved.